Y'all, Wizard101 just had a recent update that features a pretty massive change to AOEs. AOEs. Pretty much everyone that plays Wizard101 knows about AOEs. They use AOEs. We're talking about multi-target spells, right? Blizzard, Meteor Strike, Tempest. If you quest or farm, you've used spells like this. These are the most used spells in Wizard101. What did they do to AOEs, you might be wondering? Well, for the first time ever, according to the patch notes, an entire class of AOEs are enchantable for the first time. Selective targeting spells. Now, if you don't know what a selective targeting AOE is, I don't blame you. This is not like a fleshed out feature. This honestly only started getting introduced about 2 years ago. But for some context, right? Basically, 2 years ago, Wiz decided that regular AoEs are a little bit too overpowered for any sort of competitive or advanced combat. So they've been doing this thing where AoEs that, have worked the way we're used to have become no PvP. And these AoEs, right, the reason they're OP is because there's no drop off for the number of targets that you hit, right? This little top path blizzard that probably every ice uses, it does the same amount of damage to 2 targets as it does to 3 or 4. But the balance is, most AoEs feature a bottom path that have this little symbol on them called selective targeting. And the way that they work, right? They'll actually start at more damage than a normal AoE, but the damage will drop off the more targets that you have. For the first time ever, you could actually enchant these. So now, finally, they're in the conversation. So the first question on a lot of people's minds is this worth using over our regular AoEs? So here's the deal, right? These bottom path elements, with selective targeting anyways, sometimes they do flat damage where they would otherwise be in overtime in cases like Snow Angel. Very often, they feature utilities that you just don't get with regular AoEs, so there are ways to counter stuff and use things out on the field. Like, for example, Snow Angel can give up traps for weaknesses, and there's even spells where you can actually multi-buff with, like, Snowball Barrage, for example. It'll multi-buff all the targets that you choose with this because it's a hit and trap. But there's a lot of benefits to this, along with the fact that it's versatile. If you have a single target, it's always better than a regular AoE. However, though it's versatile, the drop-off for even 2 targets being affected is pretty crazy. For a selective targeting AoE to do more than a traditional AoE that has no drop-off, it has to do about 25% more damage. And I thought I'd illustrate this by comparing Frost Giant, which is a 7-pip, 615, no selective targeting AoE, with Snow Angel, which is a 755 damage AoE that does use selective targeting. This is about 22% better than this, meaning when there are 2 targets, Frost Giant barely does more than this. So what you see is a comparison, right? When I enchant Snow Angel, now it actually says it actually is enchanted. This is a selective targeting 1000 damage AoE, but to attack 2 people, I gotta choose one, gotta choose the other. There's a small drop off there. But as y'all can see, right? This is doing a good bit of damage, 4,800. And if I had traps on them, I would have turned them into weaknesses. Now, if I use an enchanted Frost Giant, right? No selective targeting at all. You'll notice what I'm talking about, right? It'll literally do a little bit over 4,800. We're looking at 4,900. So against 2 targets, most AoEs, especially ones that have a top path and a bottom path, they're kind of made so that it's very, very, similar, but you have normally extra utilities added on by using a selective targeting spell. The fact that this is enchantable is just something we've never seen before. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are wondering about spells like, Bunyips and Stormlord that are used literally a lot. Both of these are just short of that 25% extra damage compared to top path that you need to do more damage. That being said, the bottom path Stormlord, if you have a healer and someone puts a heal on you, you can actually do similar damage to a Stormlord while giving up the heal for multiple 45 blades. And Bunyips, it's very, very close to doing the same amount of damage to 2 targets anyways, and you can clear heals. So if you want like some anti-healing utility, especially against some heal cheats, this is literally just a better spell. Now, what's wild is there are still uses for this that actually do buff AoEs on certain schools, which I think is just kind of cool. So Balance is weirdly a school that gets a top path AoE that's much, much weaker than their bottom path AoE. Bottom path Rainbow Serpent is about 40% more powerful than top path Rainbow Serpent because of this extra school pip. Now that enchants work on bottom path Rainbow Serpent, if you're questing and you want to use a couple of turns to get that Death Pip and the Storm Pip, you have better damage output with this than you ever did with Top Path Rainbow Serp. What's also crazy is they have started adding fusion spells that also do selectively target, and this honestly really excites me because fusion spells, if y'all don't know, they get an extra bonus for the fact that you have to combine 2 cards, but in PvE, that's not really that hard. So I made this random setup where I have 177 fire damage and 177 storm damage, and I wanted to show how crazy it is because, like, right now, fire doesn't really have a good AoE at around 6 to 5 pips. They got Phantasmania, they got Lightning Dragon. That's about it. I think the fact that fusion AoEs, right? These are things that, like, I feel like we've only really seen in the past year and never really got to use them. I think these are going to be the real way in which, like, PvE, the casual experience, gets affected. Now, keep in mind, this doesn't have Storm Crit, which you could do with pins, but I'm not going to do it. So we got to divide the fire spell by 2 to see the actual damage. But let's say that I do an enchanted Phantasmania, right, on these mobs, and divide it by 2 to know the actual base damage. We're looking at 4486 damage, right? Divide that by 2. You're looking at like 2240 damage, right? Like with an enchanted 5 pip AoE that you use just normally. So this is where it gets really crazy, right? We're looking at, you know, like 2200-ish damage being what you want to beat. With these fusion formulas that are AoEs, especially for higher DPP schools, you can now make an AoE that's selective targeting. You could enchant it, and it will outpace regular AoEs. So I'm going to be attacking both of these guys with a Lightning Dragon. 2200 is the damage to beat. I think this is really cool because even though I'm getting 2 targets attacked, I'm still going to be doing more damage. And I could easily, right? I could easily run more. This is 2600 versus like the 2200 that we were trying to beat. So this change, it makes fusion AoEs way better than they used to be. It gives certain schools like balance an extra AoE that they could use. But I would say the big takeaway from this is when people are more used to selective targeting in general, it might be less of a leap to take when they're not able to do traditional AoEs in advanced combat, right? We're looking at 4v4, 3v3. They're going to be adding team PvP and also things like raids and challenge mode if they ever flesh it out even more than they're doing right now. I would actually love if now that you could enchant AoEs, if every school, maybe in an upcoming update, could get access to a fusion AoE that's as good as Lightning Dragon, right? There are a few of these for every school. I think has some sort of spell that they can make that is a selective targeting AoE, but not all of them are gonna be like Storm, right? With where, like, you know, you're doing 900 damage. Not all of them are gonna be like that. It would be cool if every school had access to just more damage while using selective targeting spells if you fuse spells to begin with. I think Fire might be the only school that actually gets this. It is really cool. There's ways to run max storm damage on a Fire. You could start seeing way more ways to do stuff, and you also have added utilities like heal clears, like in the case of Lightning Dragon. So yeah, definitely a weird change. I think there are definitely things that I missed with this video, maybe more than Fire and Balance got something out of it. But let me know what y'all think of selective targeting. Are y'all going to be using any spells that you never would have touched before? Is this opening y'all up to the bottom path spellman? I think that's really their goal. I think it's to get casual PvEers to get their feet a little bit wet with some things like, you know, selective targeting, which is kind of a foreign concept. But I don't know. I'm excited to see if any of this shakes up PvE or the meta around it in general. Let me know what y'all's thoughts are. Drop a like, drop a comment, let me know y'all's opinions. I look forward to reading all of y'all's thoughts. Stay awesome, y'all. See y'all soon. And yeah.